Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. We are so grateful for everyone for this important event and to learn and to engage civically. We are just a few short weeks from the 2024 election, one of the most important elections our community has seen in recent history. With anti-Semitism reaching record highs, outbreaks of violence taking place in our own backyard, and college campuses becoming hostile environments for Jewish students, we knew that it was essential we hosted a forum like this tonight. 2 of the 4 candidates who will be before you tonight will go on to serve in office and will make critical decisions that will impact all of us here in the Jewish community and beyond. Whether or not it's anti-Semitism on campus, managing bias in ethnic studies, and increasing our community's safety. Among other vital statewide issues, such as the California budget, housing, and addressing education, social services, and beyond. JFED LA and JPAC set a few goals for this event tonight. We want to help deepen our community's understanding, especially in this moment. We also want to get a better sense of the commitments to our community as well as the visions of our future elected leaders. What choices are they going to make that can help impact us here in California? We hope that by bringing you all together tonight, that we will help these future candidates learn about the breadth and activity and the diversity of the Jewish community. And gather here tonight, we have leaders from across Los Angeles, and we're so pleased that so many of you have come out tonight. We have rabbis, we have leaders from organizations who reflect elements of our diverse Jewish Los Angeles, whether or not it's members of the Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox community, Jews of color, including Mizrahi and Persian Jews, members of the LGBTQ community, and beyond. Leaders who had some of our many Jewish advocacy, education, and social service organizations are also here with us. These are organizations that are providing social services to the districts in which these candidates serve as well. So we have an impact that expands far beyond throughout Los Angeles. We are also joined by deeply and politically active lay leaders, board and committee members who dedicate themselves to serving and helping protect the Jewish community. We are grateful to each and every one of you for coming tonight and taking the time to listen, to learn about the critical issues that impact all of us here in Los Angeles, Angelenos, and looking for solutions that will help us address them. This is core to the Federation's mission, to build our civic muscle and strengthen our education and engagement. And with that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand it off to David Buckarsley, our trusted partner and executive director of JPAC, the Jewish Public Affairs Committee, who will be moderating tonight's program. Thank you, David.
So it's so good to see all of you. While there are a lot of eyes on the presidential and congressional races right now, our state legislature has a huge impact in our lives. At JPAC, we work throughout the year with our legislative and Jewish community partners, many of who are in the room right now, to leverage the impact of state government and build a more safe and just society. As a result of these partnerships, in the last 5 years, we have helped pass crucial legislation to counter anti-Semitism and hate, expand mental health, anti-poverty, and anti-hunger initiatives, and support immigrants and older adults. And we've secured nearly $500 million in state funding for our community's greatest needs. So that's why it's critical that we're all making informed decisions about who will represent us in state government in this election season, and that's why it's critical that we're doing this tonight. Thank you all for coming and for demonstrating your ongoing commitment to state-level work. And I want to offer a special thank you to the Federation for opening up their space and for co-hosting this forum with us tonight, so thank you. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. JFED LA is a 501c3 and therefore does not endorse candidates or support campaigns. JPAC is a 501c4, which is an advocacy nonprofit with a 501c3 educational arm, and we are also careful to remain nonpartisan and not endorse candidates. So this is an educational forum designed to give each of the candidates an equal opportunity to share their vision and positions on issues most important to our community. What you do with that information is up to you. When we finish this forum for both races, there'll be more time for all of you to introduce yourselves to the candidates and exchange contact information. So here are the rules for how this forum will go. I will first invite the two candidates for Assembly District 52 to join me on stage for a 30 to 40-minute conversation, and then we'll have the Senate District 23 candidates come up to do the same. We'll do a coin toss to determine who answers the first question first, and then we'll alternate who goes first from there. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question, and Miller, sitting up front here, is keeping track of a time with a countdown timer that we'll all be able to see up here. And when it runs out, you'll see a cute picture of his dog, so that's how you know your time is up. And keep in mind for the candidates that this is a forum, not a debate, and we kindly ask that you stick to responding with details about your vision and your priorities, as opposed to focusing on your opponent. If you do mention your opponent or their specific policies, I will give them an additional 30 seconds to respond. If you go over time or there ends up being any need for a back and forth, I will step in as appropriate, but hopefully that won't be necessary. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all four of our candidates to stand up so we can acknowledge them. So please welcome on the end here, please all stand up, Jessica Coloza. Over here on to your right is Frankie Carrillo. Closest to me here is Kip Mueller. And then to his right, to your left, is former Assemblymember Suzette Valadares. We'll begin with the race for Assembly District 52. So I'd like to invite up Jessica and Frankie to join me. AD 52 encompasses East LA, East Side neighborhoods like Eagle Rock, Echo Park, and Silver Lake, and parts of Glendale. Jessica, actually, I've got this coin in my pocket. You're first alphabetically, so I'm going to ask you to call heads or tails. Give it 1 second. Right now.
Hello? There you go. I will do heads.
Okay, if it lands on heads, then you'll go first.
All right.
And it is tails. So we're going to start with Frankie with the first question, and then we'll alternate back and forth. Okay. So thank you both for spending time with us this evening. We appreciate, and you might want to turn on your mic too.
Done.
Oh, perfect. We appreciate you answering our questions and look forward to working together. Let's see. I've got my questions here. Here we go. Okay. So first question is going to be a simple one. Can you please introduce yourself and share a bit about why you're running and some of your top priorities? And remember, 90 seconds.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Federation, for having us. My name is Frankie Carrillo. I have an interesting dynamic here in the 52nd. My parents, when they immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico in the early 60s, they arrived to the 52nd. Soon after, I was born in General Hospital, not too far from where we called home. After that, what is unfortunately my claim to fame, when I was 16 years old, I was wrongfully accused of killing the man. I told the sheriff's department that they had the wrong person, and no one believed me. Soon after that, I was tried as an adult, facing a jury trial here in Los Angeles, and sadly, I was sentenced to about the remainder of my life behind bars. The fighter that I didn't know existed in me surfaced, and for the next 20 years, I advocated for myself until the evidence surfaced, and I was exonerated in 2011. When I came home, I was always wanted to be a lifelong student, so I attended LMU here in Los Angeles, sued the sheriff's department for what had happened to me, got married, got divorced. I have two beautiful children that came out of that matrimony, Akiva, who's 10, Frida, who's 10 and 7. The advocate that I came home with remains. I want to put use to what I learned, the wisdom that I brought home with me, the struggles that remain, not only when I was a young boy, but that exist here today. My candidacy is one of focusing on justice for all, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Frankie, and thank you for sharing. Jessica?
Wait for the doggy timer. Thank you and good evening, everyone. Jessica Cloza, candidate for Assembly District 52. First, thank you to JPAC and JFED for hosting this really important event. I know this is not an easy time to host a community event in the wake of all the things that are happening in the Jewish community, especially in light of last week's anniversary of the October 7th attacks. So thank you for being here. For me, I am a proud public servant, proud immigrant from the Philippines, and I'm running to fight for families like mine and like yours. It's really important for me to be here tonight because I'm here to really express my commitment to being a friend and an ally of the Jewish community. It's really important for me to be here because I'm here to fight for anti-Semitism, against anti-Semitism in all its forms, especially at the state level, and really to fight for people who are being targeted just for who they are. And this forum, as we get to speak to the issues, it's going to be really important because I believe that my lived experience, my professional experience working for President Obama, working for Mayor Eric Garcetti, our first Jewish mayor, working now for our Attorney General, is really important to not just saying the right things, but being effective and actually delivering for fighting for these solutions that protect all of our communities and all of our families. And that's what I'm here to demonstrate tonight. So thank you all.
Thanks to both of you. One more round of applause for our candidates for being here. So really appreciate both of your introductions. We're going to divide our time together up into three general sections. We'll first talk about Jewish community safety, then we'll talk about anti-Semitism in education, and then we'll talk about supporting vulnerable communities. So I will take us through that. And I may or may not introduce when we switch to the next section, but we're going to start with community safety. Anti-Semitic incidents, and we're going to start with you, Jessica. Anti-Semitic incidents have increased at alarming rates over the last decade, with a particularly astounding surge following October 7th. Many Jewish residents in our region are experiencing threatening behavior and speech for the first time, and the increased fear in our community is really palpable. According to the ADL, anti-Semitic incidents increased 200%, which is a threefold increase in the year following October 7th, compared to the same period a year before, which was already at a record high. So, as you just mentioned, it's a pretty critical time for our community, and the state has an undue role to play in this type of work. What specific ways will you work to counter anti-Semitism?
Thank you for your question. First and foremost, let me say that, anti-Semitism and hate have no place in our city and no place in our state. I'm so proud of my history in public service, where I've had a really long relationship of working with the Jewish community and Jewish organizations. In the Attorney General's office, we do and release annual reports of hate crimes, and this past year we released a 2023 report where we showed that hate crimes have doubled against the Jewish community, and acts of anti-Semitism are increasing after October 7th. And thank you to ADL, by the way, for their work long before the AG's office on tracking these hate crimes, because it's important that if we see something, we do something, that tracking these hate crimes and incidents is not enough. We actually need to make sure that we use a data-driven approach to make sure that we get more resources for our communities. Some of the ways in which I plan to combat anti-Semitism in the Assembly is to, one, make sure that I work with our Jewish caucus. I'm proud to have the support of Assembly members Jesse Gabriel, Rick Chavez-Zabur, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, and so many others. And that's going to be really critical and important because allyship and the solidarity during times of hate is going to be really critical. I know this as somebody who has been attacked herself, especially during COVID pandemic. The API community increased a rise in anti-Asian hate crimes, and one of the first communities that was out there with us was the Jewish community. So thank you for standing with us.
Thank you. And Frankie?
Thank you, David. I approached this a little bit different. I'm raising two Jewish children, as I mentioned, Akiva and Frida, he'll be 11 soon, and Frida's 7. And I think about not only through the lenses of a father, but the community overall. So obviously they're not, my children are not the only focus that I have when it comes to the Jewish community. But there's folks here from the Silver Lake JCC where my kids went to school, and there's a great community that I've been welcomed into. Regardless of my Mexican background, I've learned a lot, and I've befriended this community, or they befriended me. In my many trips to Israel, I've lectured at the Hebrew University. Every time I go there, I've been in many of their publications, including Playboy, in case anyone reads that. But the reality is that I come with a different perspective of seeing the Jewish community as my people, as folks who have embraced me and who I share Shabbat with and break bread with. Obviously, someone using my own personal story of being persecuted wrongly, I understand the importance of making sure that we prevent that. I understand the importance of how slippery that slope can be. I am someone who is very sensitive to injustice. I think about my sons coming home and sharing stories from something that happened in class, that someone said something. And obviously, it's a great opportunity for myself as a father to give some insight about what this means and what the world is going through, and to be very supportive, not only to him, but the Jewish community overall.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. So for the next question, we'll start with Frankie. According to the Pew Research Center, 82% of Jewish adults in the United States said caring about Israel is an essential or important part of what being Jewish means to them. What is your relationship to Israel? And how would you deal with issues pertaining to Israel while in office? Specifically, how will you work, if at all, to combat campaigns to delegitimize and demonize Israel, like the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement?
So just to add a little bit more about my connection, I've been working with the Public Defender's Office in Israel and actually in Jerusalem for a number of years. They have their own branch of the Innocence Project there. And so I've been working diligently with cases that obviously this issue of wrongful conviction is a epidemic that affects the entire world. But I think about, you're right, what is happening today in Israel and Palestine is horrific. It breaks my heart to see the pain. Obviously, as a father, I'm always thinking about the images that I see on both sides where people are hurting. There was a family member who came from Tel Aviv here with her children to find safe harbor, which was wonderful. But I think about what I can do as an assembly member is to use my lived experience, my relationships with Israel, my relationships with the community, and remind people that we have to treat each other equally, we have to treat each other fair, we have to protect one another. And obviously, I will always go back to being a father of 2 Jewish children. And that would always be my first lens in how I think about everyone needing to be protected.
Thank you. Jessica?
Thank you. For me, I haven't had a pleasure of being and going to Israel yet, but I would love to go someday soon. I would love to work with JPAC on that and take a trip out myself. For me, I'm proud to have served for our first Jewish mayor in Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti, and I know my colleague here who's now at JFED, Tanaz, has done a lot of really critical work in making sure that we not only talk about fighting and combating anti-Semitism, that we really bring our Jewish community leaders and our Jewish organizations to the forefront and at the table so that we work with you in what's happening and what our families are experiencing. From our campaign, we've knocked on thousands of doors and we have called thousands of people. In Assembly District 52, there's about 5,600 Jewish voters, and they're scared. You know, they're really scared about going to the grocery store and taking their kids to school. And so for me, that's what keeps me up at night. The things that I think about as it relates to Israel is really how it's impacting families here domestically. And so there's been a lot of really important things and plans that the White House has put out to combat anti-Semitism, and plans that also Governor Newsom has put out, a detailed plan and strategy about how we do that to combat hate. And one of my goals in the State Assembly is to make sure that we find the resources so that we can fund these programs and actually implement them. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And if I can do one quick follow-up for both of you, and this doesn't have to be a 90-second one, but just very quickly, if you can touch on your opinions or perspectives on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and if you would indeed ultimately help work with us to oppose such efforts in California. Frank, we'll go Frankie and then Jessica.
I would work to help out.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for your question. I mean, this is something I've talked to Assembly members Zabur and Jesse Gabriel about. You know, it's not something that is helpful to our Jewish community here locally, and it's something that I would love to work with JPAC on and the Jewish Caucus on. So thank you.
Great, appreciate it. All right, we're going to move to education, and this one we'll start with Jessica. An important and highly sensitive issue to the Jewish community is ensuring that ethnic studies is both implemented in our schools, but also done so without including anti-Semitic and anti-Israel bias in it. At JPAC, we're leading a statewide coalition dedicated to this kind of nuanced and balanced work, but unfortunately, many schools are not following state law when it comes to implementing ethnic studies in a way that doesn't harm the Jewish community. So how would you help ensure, if at all, that ethnic studies curricula is both implemented in schools and remains free from anti-Semitic and anti-Israel content? Jessica, go for it to take that.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I am the first person in my family to graduate from college. I went to UC San Diego. I grew up in a working class family. My dad was a janitor, became a healthcare worker, and my mom started as a cashier at the 99-cent store and then became a caregiver and then a nurse. They fought really hard so that I can go to college. And my first major was actually political science, international relations, and I ended up taking so many ethnic studies courses because I felt like I was reading the other half of a history book that was ripped out of my poli-sci book that I ended up actually getting a second major in ethnic studies. And so I am baffled about some of the things that I'm seeing in the anti-Semitic curriculum that I'm seeing play out as it relates to attacking the Jewish community. So for me, a priority would be how do we create a more inclusive curriculum for ethnic studies? And it's something that should be non-controversial. You know, it's really about making sure that we have an inclusive curriculum, but more importantly, a safe and secure school environment so that kids can actually learn and that they aren't attacked for wanting to get a better education. And so that would be my priority and look forward to working with all of you on that. I know it's something that has been a really important issue this past legislative cycle.
Thanks, Jessica. And Frankie?
You know, I mentioned that after I came home, I attended Loyola Marymount University, and I too was first to go to college in my family. And so for me, there was no one to really lean on about, you know, or saw a path to folks in my family who had been there and done that. So the university setting was really new to me, and there was Chicano studies, and there was other cultural studies there. As far as I can recall, there was definitely at LMU, there was definitely teaching folks about, you know, just either historical or religious. I'll wait for the, or maybe not. So I didn't see a void there, but I think obviously this is a number of years ago. But obviously now it's in present day. That's obviously been very challenging. What I know about an assembly member's role is that we can put pressure on the regents of schools, especially UCs and community colleges, to make sure that they put pressure on folks who are actually on campus to do the right thing. There's a lot of money that's diverted specifically to UCs and colleges in California. That obviously we're talking about budgets now. We're talking about making sure that the money is used wisely. And if there are specific presidents of universities who are preventing that, how that sort of trickles down is the pressure from Sacramento goes to the regents and then down to the folks who are actually on campus to make sure that these things are being taught. Obviously, I want my children to be aware of their own personal history, other than just hearing it from Safta. So it'll be good.
Appreciate it. So we'll move on to the next one and start with you, Frankie. Last spring, college students across the state set up encampments on their campuses with checkpoints that oftentimes blocked Jewish students from parts of campus. The UCs and the CSUs responded by establishing time, place, and manner policies. How do you feel about the tactics that college protests are using and the response from universities, and how would you engage or respond to community concern?
So I was watching the news. I was watching the news as well, and I didn't get a chance to see it with my own eyes. I definitely caught it from the news. You know, I will say that there is a long history of protests. There's a long history of folks who have taken multiple mutual sides. Obviously, what always concerns me is what happens after the fear mongering, the hatred that doesn't go away when the camps are taken away. I understand that we're talking about, you know, First Amendment rights. People want to make sure that people understand that there's someone else who maybe can't speak up, but they want to be the voice of those folks. My concern will always be is to make sure that everyone is protected, that someone shouldn't be pointed out or selected and in any way, obviously in any way hurt, I will always be in support of folks who want to practice their First Amendment and voice their opinion. Obviously, there should be a space where that's being done safe, and that would always be my concern, to make sure that those conversations are done in a way where no one is hurt.
Appreciate it. And Jessica?
Thank you. As I mentioned, I am a proud alumni of UC San Diego during my time as a college student. I've also been at the picket lines. I've marched, I've protested against tuition increases. During my time at UC San Diego, we also had a racist incident where we found a noose on campus that caused a lot of uproar. And during our time there, we never resorted to inciting violence on campus or making other students on campus feel unsafe just for who they are, even if they didn't want to participate in our protests. So some of the actions that have taken place on college campuses and universities this past summer have been really troubling to me as somebody who also runs a campaign with a lot of college students, that our first priority has to be protecting all students. And that has to be priority number one. And so, I was appalled, honestly, at how the administration handled, in particular, UCLA with what happened. And so, for me, one of the things that I would do is really working with, the Jewish caucus, especially Assembly members Jesse Gabriel and Rick Chavez-Abur, who I know have been very active on this front in ensuring that we create statewide policies that protect all of our students. And I know we also have to balance free speech and protecting that too, but there's ways to accomplish both.
Thank you both. Really appreciate your candor on these questions. This is quick. We're doing something unique today, which is trying to do multiple candidate forums in one. So this might feel like we're going through this pretty quickly, and I appreciate you all bearing with us for that. So we are now going to move into our supporting vulnerable communities section. And we'll start with you, Jessica. Helping refugees and asylum seekers is central to the American Jewish experience and core to our values. In fact, welcoming the stranger is mentioned 36 times in the Torah, more than any other commandment. The state has provided funding for San Diego's Rapid Response Network, and JPAC supported SB 85 this year, which would have extended case management for refugees, but was ultimately vetoed by the governor. So thinking about refugees and asylum seekers, how should California support those communities?
Well, one, thank you to all the organizations that are part of JPAC for doing this really critical work of providing immigration services, family services to all of our families, regardless of their immigration status. You have been the backbone of so many communities, Jewish or not, and that doesn't matter. When you go to a Jewish organization, you just help people who need help. So thank you, first and foremost, for that. For me, I'm a proud immigrant born in the Philippines, and, we are all children of immigrants and refugees who really just want to fight for a better life for ourselves, especially if you're fleeing from violence. And so for me in the state legislature, one of the biggest things that we're going to be tackling is the state budget. This past year we had a budget deficit of $50 to $70 billion, thanks to Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, who's our budget chair. He helped navigate us out of that crisis. But a priority of mine to protect immigrants and refugees would be to ensure that we protect this really critical funding that goes to our nonprofit and community-based organizations who provide this work to our communities. So that'll be a top priority of mine. And then the second thing that I also really care about, English is my second language, and so language justice in this space is really important to make sure that we provide access to all of our communities when we provide services. So those would be some of my priorities.
Thanks, Jessica. And Frankie?
Great question. So, I think it's really working with federal partners and thinking about the bigger picture with funding. Obviously, California is one of the many hubs of folks wanting to experience either the California dream or the California Hollywood dream, if that dream is still alive. So people are drawn to come here. But I'm always concerned about the conversation at the southern border, about folks who are coming into our country, seeking a better life, and once they arrive, and under whatever title or circumstances, I'm always concerned about their assimilation into finding safety, finding housing, finding folks who can relate with their past. Now it's their past, if it's a language issue, as Jessica has pointed out. But one of my main focuses is making sure people don't forget the rich history that they come with. I think one of the things that I've noticed is people who arrive to this country want to assimilate so much that they almost want to surrender their cultural identity to fit in. And I think we as a society should be welcoming people and their strengths and their obviously their food and their dance and their past, and making sure that there is no stereotype about how that looks when they arrive. That's a really big thing for me because it enriches the the fact that we're this breadbasket of the world where people come here and they have amazing ideas that can make our world much better.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. With baby boomers aging and entering their senior years, a major public policy concern is the potential burden an aging society will place on the caregiving system and public finances. Many of these older adults are or will be facing food insecurity, homelessness, and a general disconnection as their own abilities, resources, and support systems run out. What will you do to support an increasing older adult population? And can you talk about some specific policies that you might be interested in championing?
Absolutely. My father passed during my incarceration, so I didn't get a chance to see my father in his elder years. But today, this morning, I was canvassing in Highland Park, and I met a gentleman, Joe, who was walking with a big stick, and his caretaker was with him, a young guy with a lot of tattoos. And I thought that they were a grandfather and grandson, but it wasn't. The guy was working. And it was interesting engaging them, and really Joe wanted just to share with me that his caregiver was asking him questions that his children had never even thought about asking. The guy said, the caregiver asked him what was the best thing he's ever done in his life. And he's like, man, I wish my kids would have asked me that. So there's this rich wealth of knowledge that needs to be passed down. I always think about my father and what his senior life would have been like. I think it's a world where sadly, we focus a lot on the young, and seniors unfortunately get the short end of the stick. But I think I would love to focus on community centers. Health is obviously very part of growing up and getting, it might be an illness. But I think about housing for seniors. I think about their care and making sure they're not alone. Loneliness is one of the leading factors for people either just falling into depression and potentially even suicide.
Thanks. And Jessica?
Thank you for the question. Working with our seniors is super personal to me. I grew up with a mom who was a caregiver at a retirement home, and so she cared for seniors. I didn't know it at the time, but I actually did my homework in the waiting rooms of a lot of these senior homes because we couldn't afford childcare. And, right now the reality is so many of our seniors are the most vulnerable. And, for, what I see happening right now in the city of LA, for instance, we know that a lot of our programs that we created during the pandemic for seniors, like our senior meal programs, were cut. Right. And there's so much food insecurity alone in making sure that people who are older have just the basic needs. And so for me, how do we work with our faith-based organizations, our community-based organizations that we tackle the basic needs of our seniors? That's going to be really important. For me, in the assembly, I would like to designate a senior lead to specifically work with this population so that we have dedicated resources, because so many of them, especially in the pandemic, a lot of them, have fixed incomes, and so they can't afford the increase in groceries and gas that we see that some of us are able to take with our pocketbooks, but seniors are not. And so I know that burden has been placed on a lot of our nonprofit organizations, so want to work with you all in making sure that we look at and make programs specifically for seniors.
Thank you so much to both of you. According to our friends at Mazone, 40 million Americans around the country experience food insecurity. About 20% of Californians, which is nearly 10 million, and more than 25% of LA County, which is over 2.5 million, are part of that category. Which anti-hunger policies will you support or champion as an elected official? And we'll start with Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, some of the ones I just mentioned, I think access to making sure that every child, every senior, every person, every family has access to food is really important. We have some college campuses in universities within 8052. One of them is actually in the neighboring district, but it's called East Los Angeles College. It's technically in Monterey Park, but the actual, a lot of the residents and the staff actually live in East Los Angeles, which is in this district. And one of the programs that they have is a basic needs program. And it's a way for people to have dignity by being able to ask for food without asking for food. And so they showed me some of the numbers and the metrics that they have in their community colleges. And it's not just the students who have food insecurity. They also have housing insecurity, and it leads them to case manage a lot of these individuals to actually help them get the help that they need. So one of the policies that I would really invest in is also our community college system, which is really important because that's where some of our most vulnerable communities go to further their education. But at the same time, they're really struggling just to get by. And so would love to also work with JPAC on any other anti-hunger, anti-poverty initiatives that you have.
Thanks. And Frankie?
I think it ties in with the previous question about seniors. There's locations or cities like Lincoln Heights and Highland Park and even Echo Park where I live, where there's long lines of people with their little carts waiting for their weekly, opportunity to get food, mainly vegetables. What's interesting with my son Akiva, who has a bunch of ideas for me for when I get there. There's a focus on even school lunches. So he attends the local LAUSD and Elysian Heights Elementary. And there's a dynamic there with the food that's being served is based on my son's cuisine, rating. He thinks that there should definitely be a fresh kitchen in each school. And I remember I shared with him when I was growing up here in Los Angeles that that's what we had. We had salads and people were making food in the back. And I think about creating jobs for seniors, for grandmothers, for grandfathers who can find themselves in a kitchen on a campus, who can make fresh food every day. Maybe it's once a week, but to create a project that would allocate some schools either throughout the state and focus on the difference with our children eating specific foods. I think we have to start at a very young age to make sure children are not opening packages and getting that sort of pattern of that's what they eat. Instead, a fresh salad, a fresh soup, even if it's once a week to begin with, would be a great pilot that I would love to start.
Thanks. And we'll round out this group with another question about another issue that is also probably related to what you just talked about, and that's homelessness. Homelessness is consistently a top issue for Californians. So tell us about your plan to work towards ending homelessness. How would you help stop people from entering homelessness and work to get people who are homeless folks into housing? And also, how do you feel about different strategies to engage with homeless encampments?
My story leads me to say that there's a breakdown with folks who are being released from incarceration that are not prepared to either rent or be housed, and that seems to be a spiral in the wrong direction. Mental health is obviously one of the layers that's involved here. But I always think about making sure that we have this very vulnerable population who has served their time, who is assimilating back into society, who needs help to make sure that they succeed. That's really important for me. And I think that same population is 1 degree separated from someone who's been invisible or made to feel invisible or might have issues of just assimilating. So I always think about creating a coalition of folks who would be willing to volunteer or be obviously probably even be paid would be better, who understand the suffrage of folks who are just down and out. I'm always going to lead with compassion. I'm always going to lead with folks have the capability to bounce back and be resilient. Unfortunately, we're finding people at the lowest in their lives right now when they're unhoused. And I think that, there's been a lot of focus, and I think that I will always take the long road, always be very patient and hopeful that people, that where we find them today is temporary, and that they will, get back on track and be productive and be successful with their lives. So my commitment is to make sure that vulnerable families who are also at the brink of being unhoused are also brought into the conversation.
Thank you. Jessica.
I believe that we need to have a comprehensive approach to homelessness. We need to prevent people from entering homelessness, people who are rent burdened, people who are one paycheck away from being on the streets. And we also need to tackle our existing community of those on the streets, our unhoused community, many of whom have been chronically homeless. In the state, we have spent over $29 billion with a B since 2019 on this problem, on taxpayer dollars, and the problem has only gotten worse. And so for me, one of my priorities is making sure that we have accountability for the billions of dollars that we've spent on this crisis, because we don't have a lot to answer for it, and that's our taxpayer dollars. Two, how do we really work in alignment with the city, the county, the state, the federal government, so that we all have the same priorities in how we're tackling this issue, because that's also one of the problems, is that we're all probably going to give you 5 different plans, depending on which level of government you talk to, on how to tackle this issue. So that alignment and that coordination is really critical. And 3, we need some solutions now to get people off of our streets. We did this during the pandemic. We built overnight emergency shelters to get people off the streets because it was a national pandemic. This is still a pandemic, and so we have to treat it as one. And so those are some of the ways that I would address this issue.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you both to share a little bit about your relationship to coalition building. How have you engaged in intergroup work in the past, and how do you plan to foster such efforts if elected? I'll start with Jessica.
One of the most proud initiatives that I had an opportunity to lead during my time in the city of Los Angeles was when I was a public works commissioner. I was appointed in 2019 in the middle of a city hall scandal, unfortunately. This was 20 scandals ago at this point, but it was Mayor Garcetti who actually tapped me because he wanted me to focus on the work, to focus on community, transparency, accountability, and most importantly, restoring trust with our communities. During this period of time, the pandemic also hit, and the Asian American community was blamed for this global pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, the Jewish community was one of the first communities to come out in strong support and stand in solidarity with the AAPI community. And with your help, we actually launched the LA for All campaign, which is the City of LA's anti-hate initiative to really raise awareness of combating hate and bigotry in all of its forms, and also make sure that we equip people with the resources that they need to report hate speech, because we know that hate speech translates to hate violence. And we also made sure that we brought all the stakeholders to the table because we need everyone's help. And I just saw that the LA Civil Rights Department just celebrated the 3rd year of this campaign. I'm looking forward to a 4th year. So if you see the LA for All campaign, I hope all of your organizations participate next year, because we have to fight hate together. Thank you.
Thank you. And Frankie?
I will always reference my story because I should. I think about when I met my now ex-wife's family and hearing about stories about the Holocaust, and there was a bond that was created there that we had survived a very terrific, tragic experience. And what worked for me to help me be successful on the outside is to be very forgiving. My coalition building has been with judges here in LA County. The judge who freed me, Paul Bacigalupo, he and I are on a circuit where we speak. We give an example about what it can look like when people see one another. I have a position at the DA's office there where it's a place that a guy who was in prison shouldn't typically be. But my coalition building is to be in the room, is to speak to the leadership there and understand that this office makes mistakes, and it's a great opportunity for me. I've been a commissioner for the county working to oversee the probation department. Again, there's a place there where a lot of folks are surprised to see someone who was as a young boy in their custody has returned to be of service to that department. And I think that this is just one of many examples where I find myself in places where I can be an example that people have to work together. And I plan to take that to Sacramento with me.
Thank you. So to close this out, I want to give you each a chance, less than 90 seconds, maybe keep it to a minute, to give closing remarks. What did we not hear from you that you'd like to share with us, and any final thoughts that you have for us? Frankie, why don't you start?
Oh my God. I'm a great cook. I learn many trades on the inside. I can cut your hair, make you a nice meal. But at the end of the day, I want to talk about the table that is awaiting myself or Jessica when we get to Sacramento. It's a table that is made up of 80 seats, 80 members at the assembly. And I want to share with you that we in this 52nd district have an opportunity to send someone to Sacramento who has a perspective like no other. I think it's long overdue, and it's time to diversify at least one of those seats, which is the one I plan to win. And the idea is to bring a perspective that is lacking. It's a lived experience, but it's also a subject matter experience. And at the end of the day, who I am as a candidate, who I am as a human being, as a father, as a legislator, will be one that is of a listener, of understanding that it's not just the 52nd, it's all of California at the end of the day. And I plan to make you proud. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jessica?
Thank you, JPAC, JFED, and all the attendees for being here tonight. It's been an honor to be at this forum. For me, I'm here to really fight for you and your families. I am somebody whose lived experience as an immigrant, as a woman of color, and somebody who fought their way up and dedicated their life to public service because I care and I have a track record to show for it. The experience that I bring to the table, especially my professional experience working for President Obama, working for Mayor Garcetti, working for Attorney General Rob Bonta, really matters because your state legislator will cast thousands of votes every single year. And every single year, over 1,000 of these bills are signed into law by the governor. And so experience really matters, and more importantly, values really matters. And so I hope to earn your vote and your support for Assembly District 52, because I want to fight for you like I want to fight for my family, and I want to make sure that every single family and child feels safe and secure in LA. Thank you.
Thank you both. And let's give them both a round of applause. That was incredibly insightful and also done so efficiently. Thank you. So if you're willing to stick around, we invite you to do so. We'll have our next round of candidates come up because I'm sure when we're done, there are going to be folks who are going to want to talk to you more about what you shared and exchange information. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our candidates for Senate District 23, which encompasses northern parts of LA County, including Santa Clarita, Lancaster, Palmdale, and Victorville. Thank you. Come on up. Please welcome Kip Muller and former Assemblymember Suzette Valadares to the stage. We can give them a round of applause. And we're going to do the coin toss again. Kip, since you're first alphabetically, you can call heads or tails.
Okay, going heads.
Heads. And it is heads. So we're going to start with you on the first question.
Yeah.
I think we had tails last time.
Yeah.
We're to try to keep things as interesting as possible for folks. We are gonna go through a lot of the same questions, but I'm gonna do my best to change them up a little bit. But forgive me if they do feel a little repetitive. We do want to hear what you think about these issues. They're really important to our community. So we will start with Kip. Same prompt as before to get us started. Can you please introduce yourself and share a bit about why you're running? What is it important for us to know about you, and what your top priorities are?
Can we do real quick hand for David for doing an excellent job tonight? And JPAC has been so impressive. I know I only have a minute and a half, but JPAC has been so great. Each year I go to JPAC, I'm astounded by how many more people are there. I didn't know we had that many Jews in California at the last one because there's so many people there doing excellent work. I can't wait to work alongside you. I'm Kip Muller. I'm a civil rights attorney, and I want to talk a bit about my Jewish background. I am, in fact, Jewish. My good friend Rabbi Blazer sometimes jokes that I have the most Gentile name of any Jew that he's aware of. But anti-Semitism impacted me, unfortunately, from a young age. Just after my bar mitzvah, my temple was firebombed in Sacramento, and our rabbi ran in and grabbed the Torahs and actually saved them. And we literally shoveled the ashes of our temple. And there's two things I took away from that experience when I was 13 years old. The first was that anti-Semitism is always just beneath the surface if it's not out in the world and prominent like it is in the moment. It's always there, and it's something we have to be constantly aware of and combating and proactive about. The second thing I learned is we are so damn resilient as a people, and I am so proud of our people. We are so resilient. I was at the Nova exhibition today and thought the exact same thing. We go through a lot of adversity. We continue to fight, and I will take Tikkun Olam as well as Never Again to the state senate and be fighting for us. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Kip. And Suzette.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me this evening and for taking time out of your day and evening to learn about the state issues, the issues that actually impact us most. Former Assemblywoman Suzette Valadares, and I'm running in Senate District 23, which is Six Flags Magic Mountain. We go all the way out to Victorville. It is a massive district. We put lots of miles on our cars this year, I know. I have lived, played, and worked in this district since I was a kid, and I truly love my community and have spent my professional career delivering for my community. I was first elected to the State Assembly in 2020 during COVID. I'm very proud of my work for my community, of working to open business, of like Six Flags Magic Mountain, which was my first job, may I add. I'm very proud of my work in being someone who was a common sense legislator who wanted to roll up her sleeves and get things done for our community. I was a founding member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus because we know that partisan politics gets in the way of good policy in Sacramento. I'm also really excited about running for state senate and focusing on the issues that my community cares about most, which is by far the cost of living. It is too expensive to live in California. And the other thing my community is most worried about is their safety, the safety of their children, the safety of their neighborhoods. I'm focused on these two issues. I'm really excited about the opportunity to be elected to the state senate to continue to deliver for my community. Got it.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for keeping the time. I appreciate both of you. I saw you both have an eye on that. Just last week, a 35-year prison sentence was handed down in federal court to a California resident who shot and wounded two Jewish men last year as they left religious services in the Pico Robertson area in Los Angeles. The Jewish community was and remains pretty visibly shaken in light of not only this incident, but the surge in anti-Semitic incidents, which we described in the last session too. So what specific policy initiatives would you seek to introduce or support to counter anti-Semitism and hate in general and to safeguard all vulnerable communities? Suzette, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so we have seen the rise of anti-Semitism happening for years, for way too long here in California, across the U.S., and obviously globally. I'm very proud to say that during my time in the State Assembly, I supported making permanent California grants for security for nonprofits, which also make it available to synagogues, to faith-based organizations who are, we all went through and parked in the parking lot, right? We had to have the underneath of our cars screened, right? I did feel like I was in the state capitol with your phenomenal screening here, but that's a sad reality for the Jewish community and synagogues right now, is they need the extra resources. I will continue to be a voice fighting to make sure that that is funded, so our synagogues, our other nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations have access to those resources. I also am concerned about and want to be focused on being a messenger in education and advocacy. And I know we'll get into education in just a minute here. But in California, we are 39% Latino. In the U.S., 18% Latino. I think it's very important that we have Latino voices telling the truth about what is going on in the Middle East and being supportive of Israel. That's the growth and future of California and the U.S.
Thank you. And Kip?
This is something I've spoken a lot with Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, as well as Senator Scott Wiener about, and I'm proud to have the endorsement of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus as well, and we've talked a lot about how to be proactive on these issues. And that's what I mean by never again is really looking ahead to how we can protect the Jewish community. We are 3% of California and approximately 62% of religious hate crimes in this state. Inexcusable, completely unacceptable. And I've taken a lot of pride through JPAC and through the work of Jesse and Scott, watching how they are not shy or bashful when it comes to being pro-Jewish community, pro-Israel. They're on Twitter. They're arguing with trolls and crazy people, getting in front of it, getting in the media, because one of the things we have to do is sort of the soft power of being elected, which is to speak out. And I think we know this all too well as a community, that it's imperative that we're always speaking out. We're never hiding or shying away from that kind of vitriol and prejudice. The nonprofit security grants, for sure. And I know that's been wonderful, and I've seen it at my temple as well, and we appreciate it. And beyond that, we have to find other ways to, basically through the Jewish Caucus, figure out ways to continue to protect our community, whether it's on our universities and campuses and hearing horrible stories from kids who are afraid to wear a yarmulke when they're at school. We've got to be proactive, talking to the community, have advisory councils, and stay ahead and fund what's necessary.
Thank you. Now, you both did just mention Israel, and I do want to take one extra step towards that conversation. As we talked about, Israel is an essential part of Jewish identity for the vast majority of our community. So can you say, you both just kind of talked about using your voice, but can you say what more you might do while in office to ensure that California has a strong relationship with Israel? And how would you approach Israel-related issues, specifically the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement? Yep, go for it.
California actually has strong business relations, by the way, with Israel. We support a lot of startups that come out of Israel, do business with California, and I want to make sure we continue to do that because there's incredible work done out of Israel. I have family in Israel as well, and I haven't had the pleasure of visiting. I was doing the NIFTY program, but it was during the second Intifada, and we weren't able to go to Israel, so we went to Europe instead. Where we visited Auschwitz and some of the concentration camps there. Again, like reminders at a very young age of what we're facing. I think a lot of it is education and making sure people are aware of how important Israel is to our community, that we needed a safe space because we were ran out of everywhere and continue to get run out of every society we try to live in. We have anti-Semitism throughout the world, and it's proliferating more than ever, and it's so important to us, as we know, to have a home, a safe place where we know that we will remain safe. So whether it's our ethnic studies courses or other ways of making sure that we're informing people of why Israel is so important. But in terms of California's relationship with Israel, I think it's continuing to do business alongside Israel, continuing to have relationships with Israeli diplomats and visiting Israel, and seeing what the Israeli community needs from us in California.
Thank you, Kip. And Suzette?
Unfortunately, I have never been to Israel. It is a bucket list for me, especially on issues like water. They're just so advanced, and I think we do need to learn more about that from California's perspective. When it comes to BDS, I think it's really important that that the legislature continue to take up resolutions, and I would be supportive of sponsoring resolutions condemning that. And again, I come back to, from my lens of what I think I can do as a Latina, as somebody that would be elected to the state Senate, is really engaging with the Latino community. There is an organization that I have been involved with because, believe it or not, there are lots of Latino Jews. And my good friend Pepe and Rita Segal are on the board of Fuente Latina, which is a phenomenal nonprofit organization that actually invests in educating and supporting advocacy for Spanish-speaking Latinos and influencers, because this is something that, if you think about this, there are not enough individuals that can speak in Spanish language to really shine light on what's going on in Israel, and to be a voice and an advocate for Israel. I think in elected office, I will be able to be a stronger voice for organizations like Fuente Latina.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned ethnic studies, so let's dive in. As a way of framing, in recent years, Santa Ana Unified School District has implemented several problematic ethnic studies curricula. ADL, AJC, and others, who I think are all represented in this room, filed a lawsuit that unveiled how district leaders consistently made disparaging comments about Jews during the curriculum development process, and made intentional attempts to approve the curriculum, quote, under the radar, and, quote, address the Jewish question at meetings held on Jewish holidays where our community was unlikely to attend. While this is perhaps the most egregious example we've seen so far, it is just one of many school districts that have implemented harmful ethnic studies curriculum or hired biased consultants that have helped develop ethnic studies curricula. How would you help ensure ethnic studies curricula is both implemented in schools, but also remains free from anti-Semitic and anti-Israel content?
Yeah, so I do want to say that when AB 101, I believe, the ethnic studies bills was presented to me in the state assembly, I voted no on it for this very reason, because I felt like there are too many organizations like the Coalition for the Liberty of Ethnic Studies that actually want to insert anti-Semitic language in our curriculum. And we're seeing that play out right now. So for me, it's and I know that there is a movement within the legislature led by members of the Jewish caucus and other members to make sure that now that it is part of law, it's probably going to be very hard to roll that ethnic studies mandate back. However, we can engage with our communities, with parents, to be a part of understanding and be a part of developing curriculum to make sure we don't have anti-Semitic language in our curriculum. And I mean, I'm sure you felt this and you've seen this in your campaign right now. It's really scary for youth right now. When we are communicating about what is going on in Israel, about what we're doing in the state, I get those text messages back. I get those Facebook posts back with very severe anti-Semitic language. And this is being perpetuated in classrooms, and it needs to end.
Thank you. And Kip?
Yeah, and yeah, we see it. I mean, just telling it like it is, there's folks on the far left and being the Democrat and the Republican on the far right, where we see more alignment that's scary on that front when you're running for office. I think that Assemblymember Rick Zabur has taken a really impressive, lead on the issue of ethnic studies curricula. And I think we need to continue to figure that out because there's still work to do to make sure that nobody's being taught anti-Semitism in classrooms or anti-Israel or BDS or any of this stuff. I know that there's going to be efforts made to, potentially at the state level, preempt what's going on at local levels so that, as Jews, we're consistently some of the top most, discriminated against, especially per capita, but in general of any discriminated class in the state. And there's steps the state can take to make sure that if you're one of those class of most discriminated against, that the curricula addresses that and calls out anti-Semitism in this case. And I think we can work on that at the state level to make sure that that our curricula always include anti-Semitism and teaching students. I'm afraid that a lot of young people just aren't familiar with even the Holocaust, I've noticed, let alone more recent anti-Semitism. And that's a shame. All of them should be aware of what caused it and what, signs of it are around even today, the bubbling of what, could be violence towards our community.
Thank you. So moving on to campuses, as we talked about, we've seen encampments pop up across college campuses after October 7th that at times has barred pro-Israel students from entering libraries and other school buildings. And it also created a purity test culture around Zionism that has made many Jewish students feel unsafe on campuses. We haven't yet seen how the campus dynamic has fully developed this coming year. But many Jewish students feel a general sense of unease as the school year begins. Do you think campuses have been adequately upholding their codes of conduct, and what will you do to ensure a safe and inclusive campus for all students?
No, I think a lot of campuses have failed, and I went to Berkeley and Columbia, so I get messages from all my friends at both schools being like, "Are you seeing what's going on at your school?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm seeing it. Yes, I'm disappointed. This is awful," and I think it reached its apex during that congressional hearing when the presidents of schools couldn't say, whether violence towards Jews constituted or threats of violence constituted harassment or not. I think there needs to be a real reckoning on that front, and that our schools first and foremost have to be a safe place for students to go. And I thought we all agreed, regardless of race, gender, religion, everybody gets to be safe, everybody's protected at our schools. Of course, as was mentioned before, free speech is important. Berkeley, the birthplace of the free speech movement, school takes a lot of pride in that, and I think that's great. And students should be able to speak freely about how they feel. The moment that begins to cross into intimidation or harassment, it has to be dealt with immediately. And I don't even think that's that complicated. I think there was just a lot of people who were afraid to step up, unfortunately. So nobody should be afraid of having a Star of David or a yarmulke walking around their campus. That's completely unacceptable. And I think we agree on that. And I think, again, the state's got to be proactive about dealing with this and making sure that the leadership at these schools themselves are proactive in protecting the Jewish community on campuses.
Thank you. Suzette?
Yeah, I will be the first person to do all that I can to protect your First Amendment right? Even if that means I think you're a jerk, I will still support your right to the First Amendment. However, when violence, when intimidation, when fear jeopardizes another person is where we have to draw the line, and especially from the state's perspective. And what we saw happen, I have cousins that were at UCLA this past year that were not Jewish, and their hearts were breaking, and they felt intimidated and scared, and they couldn't learn, and they didn't have class. And you know what? As a legislator, our role and responsibility is to make sure every student feels and is safe. Our role is also to control the purse strings. So we have authority to withhold funding to these universities, especially public universities, that aren't going to keep our children safe and support our students. And that is something I will be very looking forward to doing when I get back to the State Senate.
Thank you both. Moving into our supporting vulnerable communities section. Inspired by our own immigration stories, Jewish Family Service agencies are some of the state's leading service providers for refugees and asylum seekers who are settling in California. As mentioned previously, the state has provided significant funding for the San Diego asylum seeker shelter and support services, which is led by Jewish Family Service San Diego and a JPAC member, but has also failed to pass legislation to support enhanced services for refugees. How do you think the legislature should engage with refugees and asylum seekers?
Yeah, I'm very proud of my work in the State Assembly for vulnerable communities, because it's not just asylum seekers, it's underserved communities. I was keenly aware in my community of the need for passing legislation to support vulnerable communities. Some of the things I passed were, I worked on legislation that expanded preschool access to dual language learners. I worked on legislation to support victims of domestic violence through offering programs like the Safe at Home, restraining orders in multiple languages. These are things where I think the state can take a greater role in expanding access to programs and services for our vulnerable communities.
Well, let me specifically talk about the asylum process, and I have handled a few cases as a pro bono asylum attorney. I know Bet Sedek has done phenomenal work on that front. And on the 4th of July, I often, not every time, but I try to spend it with a family from Nicaragua that I represented. She had peacefully protested at her university. And as a result, the government had blacklisted her, was targeting her, shot at her car when she was in it. They were harassing her and her family at their house. And finally, when she realized she's going to die if she stays, she escaped with her kids. Her kids were separated from her for several months. I don't know exactly how long, when she got here. and she was at Adelanto Detention Facility in the district we're seeking to represent, and represented her. She's now studying to become a civil engineer. Her kids are going to be in college here in the United States. And I feel like we're forgetting, and we need a reminder, not so much folks in here, but in general in this country, that isn't that what this country was supposed to be all about? We're a nation of immigrants that gives folks a second chance at life. And if somebody comes here legally through the process and says, can I please have asylum? I've been politically persecuted and I want a second chance at life here. I'm so proud that they get to build their lives here. That's what makes this country so beautiful. And so that's why I think it's a patriotic thing to be able to actually spend July 4th with this family. And it's work that I'm proud to do.
Thank you both. Many organizations here today work with older adults in some capacity. It's an incredibly dependent population, as we mentioned previously. Many older adults are entering homelessness or hungry or disconnected due to not having the resources and support systems they need. What will you do to address these older adult needs? Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel as though we could learn from other societies in terms of the sort of throwaway culture we have with our seniors. I think it's a really sad state of affairs. And I saw it with my grandma on my dad's side, who was a single mom and didn't really have enough to survive on her own, had Social Security, but ended up she ended up in a group home, but it was really a struggle for her. And these are just the basics, I feel like, we're the wealthiest country the world has ever known. And we have people who can't get food. We talked about food insecurity, don't have access to basic curable, illness prevention. So they die of things we could easily cure on our streets. And unfortunately, we just don't, it's our priorities. Our priorities aren't there. And I think at the state level, there's a lot we can do. We fund, caretaker programs, IHSS and others that help make sure that we're taking care of folks, making sure that we get funding to nonprofits that do wonderful work to protect our seniors and fight for our seniors. Of course, the federal level, it's Social Security and Medicare. But there's more we can do. And I think that it's a question of priorities. My mom's part of the Alzheimer's Association, and we take a lot of pride in being a family that cares about our seniors. And I look forward to doing work for seniors in our state Senate, too.
Thank you, Kip. Suzette?
Yeah, so unfortunately in 2018, about 13 months after I had my own baby girl and became a new mom, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I left the workforce to be my mom's full-time caregiver, was responsible for her advance directive, was literally fighting with hospice bureaucrats on her deathbed. And man, was that an eye-opening experience to go from those two extremes of becoming a mother and how beautiful and bright-eyed it is with beautiful rooms and a doctor for this and a nurse for that, to the opposite spectrum of life, which is, let's just be frank, it is ugly. And it was a huge eye-opener for me. So in terms of, and now I have a father who for the first time in a long time is living alone. I have to check in with my dad quite a bit. I look at two things we need to do, or I'd like to focus on. The first thing is increasing the workforce in healthcare. We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses or specialists to care for our aging population, yet alone the rest of our population. We need to focus on that. The other thing that we need to do is address the high cost of living in this state. And I have a tax cut plan. You can visit my website, SuzetteValadares.com, to learn more about it. Two things right off the top in that plan that we can do. We can allow individuals to deduct every single medical expense that they have. And the other thing we can do is we can increase the deduction. We can increase the deduction for dependent care, which for the multi-generational families who are paying to have their families in care facilities and or have them in their own home can get some of that reprieve.
Thank you. I also gave some jarring statistics in the last round about how prevalent food insecurity is in California, 20% in LA County, 25%. Which anti-hunger policies will you champion as an elected official, and what specific actions should California take to work towards ending hunger? Suzette.
Yeah, this is such a huge issue. We do not have enough time to talk about this. However, one of the things that I was very fortunate to have just went up to the Central Valley about a month and a half ago. And if you haven't been up there to a farm to see how our food is grown and processed, you need to do it. It's absolutely amazing. We have to address the water issue. We had a huge drought this summer that is going to affect, our produce and what we're producing healthy food. It's going to make the costs go up. We have to pass and expedite the state water project to get water to our farmers. I think that we also need to look at things like let's cut the diesel tax so that if we are cutting diesel tax, which affects grocery prices, we're making groceries more affordable. Let's support business to help reduce the cost of living, because that's the reality, is food insecurity comes from the fact that it is too expensive for everything. You have families that are choosing between keeping their electricity bill or buying food for the week. We have to address the macro of the affordability crisis that's going on in California.
Thanks. And Kip?
Let me just provide some broader context of our district. Literally referred to in Sacramento as a forgotten district. It's been last in line for resources for a long, long time. We don't have a single public four-year university in this district. We don't have a single level 1 trauma center. And one of the tough things about running for a seat like this, I'm sure you hear the stories too, there are nurses or families who say, this child was in a car accident. The helicopter couldn't get off the ground because the wind was blowing the wrong way. And as a result, the child passed away. Would have survived if there was a trauma center, pediatric emergency, et cetera, nearby. And we have some of the highest rates of COPD, childhood asthma. We're really a forgotten district, and we see how that plays out. Food insecurity is just one of the many ways. I attend, there's nonprofits in our district that give food out for free to folks, and the car line is so long that we're there for several hours and we still can't feed everybody who's waiting. And again, in the wealthiest country the world has ever known. There's a lot of things we can do. I mean, obviously schools should provide, lunches for kids. We should have, community college programs as well. My mom was a community college counselor for students with disabilities for 38 years. And she saw food insecurity on community college campuses that was prevalent as well. I think we have to, there's a lot. It's hard in 90 seconds. Food waste is a big problem. We waste about a third of the food we create. There's a lot we can do at the state level to combat it.
I appreciate you trying to keep it within the time. And folks who are interested can continue to talk afterwards as well. And we'll round out this section too, as we did last time, by talking about homelessness. I'll frame it by saying that according to a recent PPIC poll, homelessness is the third most important issue for Californians. Number 1 is cost of living, and number 2 is housing costs. So they're clearly all interconnected for people, and there's this common thread here. Tell us about your plan to work towards addressing homelessness and unattainable living costs. Kip, why don't you go first?
Let me just start by saying that I think it's a moral imperative. And I during the last panel, I appreciated just the mention that it's reached a point where it's completely unacceptable. I think all of us agree that people starving to death, again, dying of basic curable illnesses on our streets is unacceptable to us. And my grandpa was a veteran, and he didn't talk about his service often, but he would point out if he saw a vet who was homeless, and he'd just say, that's not right. And who could disagree? And who can justify the current situation we have? And we all know if we drive around LA, we see folks on the street, everybody in this room has seen people where they're like, that person shouldn't be on their own on the street. They can't care for themselves. It's just patently obvious to all of us. So how to deal with it is impossible in 30 seconds, but there were things mentioned: permanent supportive housing, temporary shelters, making sure people don't become homeless in the first place, rent abatement and other programs, and then mental health treatment and drug treatment as well. And that means we have to actually put our money where our mouths are. I supported Prop 1 in the primary because we need mental health treatment centers. We've reached an impasse. I have 10 seconds left. I have a buddy who's not in politics who said to me, is this just it? Or is this just how things are from now on? We just never solve homelessness. And that is such a distressing thing to consider, because maybe it is, but if we get the right people in office, maybe we can turn this thing around, and that's what I intend to do.
Thanks, Kip. Suzette?
Housing, diversion, and workforce, right? We have to address the housing component of it. One of the things I want to focus on, and did when I was in the state assembly, is reforming CEQA so that we can build. There's multiple developments in my community, from the Tejon Ranch development, 160,000 units that have been in process for being built for 30 years. There's another development, took them 21 years. We have to address that component to build the units that California needs. Diversion. We have to pass Prop 36. You know, I had a brother who was a runaway at 13 who had a 15-year drug addiction problem. I remember being a 16-year-old, him coming to me and trying to sell me, you know, everything, shoes to palm, what were those little palm flip thingies, whatever they were. We need to pass Prop 36 because diversion. People that are chronically either mentally ill or have a drug addiction who are trying to steal and hawk. You need that ultimatum. You're going to either get treatment or you're going to go to prison and hopefully, or to jail. And if you go to jail, maybe you'll be sober a few days enough to make that decision to get help. And lastly, workforce. I think diversion is great, but we need the beds. We need the workforce in order to actually take people off of the streets and put them into mental health and care facilities to address the addiction and mental health.
Thank you.
Seconds, that was good.
Amazing. I love that. So this will be our last question before closing remarks. And this is a new one. California, as many people in this room know, is facing a sustained budget deficit. What is your philosophy about balancing the budget, and how does supporting vulnerable communities fit into this kind of fiscal climate? Let's do that. You first.
Yeah, you know, I was very fortunate enough to have sat on the budget committee in my time in the state assembly, and we have to prioritize. Like any business owner, like any family, you know, where you own a home, you own a business, you have to prioritize, especially in your bad years, right? I think government has core responsibilities, and we cannot cheat. We cannot pull from things like public safety, from things like education. This year, the legislature suspended Prop 98, which is our guaranteed education funding. And for me, that's unacceptable. We have to prioritize, which means we're going to have to cut programs. But we also have to support innovation, and we have to support small business. We have to know that our economy doesn't have to be a finite pie. In California, we can do things to spur economic growth, and it's exactly the same attitude I will take when I get back to the state Senate.
Thank you. And Kip?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be smart with our budgeting and prepare for. There's a lot of volatility in the California state budget, and the rainy day fund is an obvious one solution that has to be taken seriously when we have good years. But I also want to mention one other thing that I think gets ignored far too often, which is there's a lot of social services and programs that pay for themselves in spades. And for one example, it's cheaper to house people than for them to be homeless. That's just a fact. And the longer we allow for someone to be homeless, not only is it's a moral issue, but it's an economic issue, because that person doesn't disappear from the world. They visit the emergency room on a regular basis, or they are processed through the criminal justice system over and over again. And it becomes extremely taxing and expensive on our system, and they're not housed. So who's winning in that situation? And so what we really have to do is be smart with our budgeting. And that includes, when it's a tough year, figuring out which programs actually do pay for themselves and are morally the correct thing to do. Which programs, of course, are expensive, where money is not being spent well. There's definitely waste in our budget. There's money that goes to organizations where it disappears, and that's a problem. There needs to be transparency and accountability. But where money's working and it's paying for itself, we can smart budget and pay for programs that actually help our budget at the same time, and you can pay to save.
Thank you. So we've reached the end. So why don't you close us out? We'll start with you first, Kip. Final remarks in a minute or less. What are we missing, and what should we know about you that we haven't yet heard?
I don't know if we're missing anything, but I just want to say that I appreciate you all. I can't wait to work with JPAC. I love this organization and the way it's grown over the past several years. I mean, David's done a phenomenal job, really great. And I'm proud to have, as I said, the California Legislative Jewish Caucus's endorsement. I can't wait to work alongside them in the state Senate. Two principles that guide me based on my Jewish identity that I mentioned earlier, and just want to emphasize. The first is tikkun olam. I love that this wasn't just about the Jewish community today. It was also about repairing the world, because that's who we are. We're people who looks outwards towards the world and want to be a positive influence on other communities than ourselves. And secondly, never again. And especially in a trying time like this right now, it's really important that we have leaders and champions who are bold in our approach to facing anti-Semitism, getting in its face, having no tolerance for it. And I look forward to doing that work in the state Senate. So thank you all.
Thank you, Kip. And Suzette, close us out.
Yeah, so You know, my family first came to California in 1911 and 1917. And they came to California for the California dream of homeownership and community and education. And for too many families, that dream is becoming further and further out of reach. My family started leaving the state. You know, I'm a mom of a 7-year-old girl, and I had kids later in life, so some of her only cousins that are her age live in South Dakota. It's one of the reasons I decided to run for state assembly, because I want the next generation of California, of the next generation to reach the California dream. The potential that a little Latina girl from the San Fernando Valley could represent her community in the state assembly when my family came here 117 years ago. But also to be a problem solver. I was a member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. We need balance in Sacramento and more common sense approach to get things done regardless of party. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's give them both a round of applause. And one round of applause for all 4 of our candidates. Thank you both. I think you can see just from hearing all 4 of them, their passion and charisma, and hope that you get a chance to get to know them a little bit after we're done here. Just want to name also, we chose to highlight these 2 races because these are really competitive races in the LA area. So of these 4 candidates that we've seen, we will be working with 2 of them, and all 4 of them have a great shot at being in office. So please take your chance to get to know them. We've got a curated audience in the room, but we will also make sure to share this video with our broader community afterwards. So thank you again for being here, and I will pass it over to Mara to close us out.
Thank you. For just a moment, let's thank David Bacarsley for moderating tonight. Thank you. We heard it twice, but it was dynamic both times. I'm also going to ask our candidates to come up to the front. We'll just do one more thank you. We're going to hang back, do photos, and we encourage you all to stick around, ask any questions that we didn't ask, take any more food that we have left, and feel free to schmooze and engage. But let's give one more thank you to you all, and we'll do a few photos after. Thank you, thank you. We hope you feel a little more prepared for November 5th. Get out the vote. All right, good night, everybody. Thank you.